everybody. It's been a little bit since my last video. Just as usual, probably going to be a little bit all over the place, but I'm going to try to keep this one pretty stationary on a singular topic. Last one I had was a little bit all over the place, which from time to time those will happen, but I think this one I'm going to try and keep a little bit more focused. First, before I even start, say hello to Chica. She's my little office buddy tonight, so you'll probably see her in and out of the frame throughout. I'll probably at some point reach down and pet her because it's a dog. You kind of have to. But so I think the topic for today is going to be something I've struggled a lot with for, good Lord, probably, let's see here, since as far back as I can remember, it was probably about 10, maybe a little bit, yeah, probably about 10. So a little over 20 years at this point. And that's my anger. I've always I've always been a very black and white person, which can be beneficial in a lot of ways, but can also you can take it too far very easily. And over the years, I've I'm still that way. I've just toned it back a bit through a lot of hard work and a lot of introspection, I guess would be the right word for that. But so let me take you back a ways. When I was about 12 was the first time it really manifested itself, and my anger was very hot, I guess would be the right term. Anger, I don't think really sums it up. It was a lot more like rage. And it first started really manifesting itself internally, as I would take it out on myself, and that actually put me into a pretty deep depressive state, to the point where I was heavily suicidal from probably 13ish to I'd say probably 18. And I'll get into why 18, what happened around that time, but it became very destructive at that point, right, where I was sitting there and I was like, okay, I'm pissed at everything, for basically, in retrospect, no reason, right? At the time I could give you any litany of reasons as far as why, right? But in retrospect, looking back at them, it was like, okay, those were not really, that was an incorrect analysis of the situation, I guess. But one of the things that really threw me out, I guess, and threw me into those was I always felt like I was in my older brother's shadow for a lot of years, and that no matter what I did, I could never step out of that, right? And in retrospect, I mean, that was a lot of self-fulfilled, right, as it tends to be. But when you're in that state, you don't recognizing that is almost not possible. I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but it's such a difficult thing to be able to pinpoint and analyze while you're in it, that it's pretty far up there as far as extreme difficulty goes. But over time, I kind of realized that when getting that angry and turning it inward, I wasn't able to really address anything. So over time, for between that 12 to 18 range, I started shifting it externally, right? So I'd start getting it'd take the smallest thing, right? Just things that most average people would look at and go, that's a really dumb thing to get exceedingly upset about. I'd fly off the handle on. And I'd go into full rage at that point. Not I'm gonna beat somebody type rage, but just I'd get super pissed off, and every little thing would throw me, right? And it was kind of interesting because at 18, give or take a little bit, right? I'm using 18 as kind of a ballpark because I don't know if it was exactly 18. I got my own dog around that time frame. I can't remember exactly what year, and I'm not kidding when I say this, right? I mean this very literally. Getting that dog and adopting that responsibility actually saved my life, because it very likely, if that had not happened and things had progressed, I would have actually ended up killing myself, which is awful, right? I mean, no one should do that. And again, right, circling back a little bit, it was entirely self-inflicted, right? Looking at it now, I can see that the reason that my dog pulled me out of it was because I had a purpose for living. I had something outside of myself that was a major responsibility, right? Whereas previously there really wasn't. I didn't really have any major responsibility for myself, right? Because I was still a kid, I was still living at home, you know, all of that side of things. And then I went and I got her, and she kind of changed everything, and it changed really fast, right? It changed really fast. So instead of being constantly like internally destructive and going down that rabbit hole, I became outwardly, right? And I realized over some years that I could take that anger that I had, that like rage, that burning like fire, I guess would be a good way to word it, and I could utilize that as a destructive yet motivating and beneficial force. Okay, so I kind of, with that, I utilized that as a motivator for doubling down to go after the things I wanted. Um, it's one of the reasons that was able to make so many quick adjustments in my life. Like when I utilized that like when I went to college, or when I had a bad breakup, I would take a lot of the anger and rage from like the fact that that ended and the perception that I was like done dirty in those relationships, that um, and I would turn that to, okay, what's my next major thing that I'm going to go at, throw everything else to the wayside and just get hyper focused and aggressive with that. So I harness all of that like anger and like resentment, if you will, into a singular point, and I would just drive, and it worked great. Like it was massively beneficial. I mean, it got me into college. It got me to strive aggressively in my career, right? Because that was the main focus I had. Was everything was just career oriented. Go, build, continue to exceed in that, and it worked amazingly well, right? When I started getting into working out, like that rage and aggression, like focusing that into the gym, oh man, I had some of the best workouts I've ever had, right? I had some of the biggest gains, like I lost a ton of weight. Um, my muscles were big. I was super athletic. You know, like it worked great. The problem was it wasn't sustainable. Um, I probably could have continued doing it, but being as introspective as I am, and as like almost obsessed with self-discovery as I am, for better or worse, right? I couldn't hold on to it for long. And one of the things I realized was, as I started understanding the root of it, right, as far as like why I was doing that, and like what it was that was pushing me more and more towards, um, almost towards that cliff, right? Not That's not the right analogy, but it probably gets some level of meaning across. But as I was getting closer and closer to that, it started becoming more and more apparent to me that I was doing it because what I was actually looking for, I couldn't find. And what I was actually looking for was some level of peace, right? And peace is almost like inner peace, right? Like that ooh inner peace of, like where you're just sitting there and you're just you, right? And there's like everything else just doesn't really affect you a ton. You're happy in where you are and who you are. And I realized that like having that rage and aggression, while beneficial at times, was counterintuitive to that underlying goal. So over time, in my probably late 20s, I started shifting away from that overall aggression, and started to search more into like trying to figure out like where my piece is, and like what I'm, um, who I am and what I'm actually looking for. And keep in mind, right, like I'm kind of glazing over this a little bit, but I mean, we're talking 10, 15, 20 years, right? So this was not a slow and easy process. There were many, many countless nights of me bawling my eyes out and tearing myself down and breaking down barriers and walls and trying to figure out like what the heck am I doing? Like why is this a problem? Why am I doing this, right? Um, In retrospect, it was worth it, obviously. But one of the things I found was as I started to put away the thing that I was utilizing when it came to that rage, um, I lost a lot of my focus, right? So career kind of started taking a back seat. It became, okay, like I'm in this job, let me do it to the best of my ability. But it wasn't, I got to push all the time for more and do more and, work the 16, 17 hours a day, and work weekends and, all of that. And workouts were a little bit more like toned back, right? Because I didn't have that burning that I must like burn, go, 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 like I didn't have that aggressive tinge to it anymore. To the point where like my trainer noticed it, people at work noticed it. Like as I started to tone that back, everything started kind of shifting, and I realized that what I was doing, I couldn't sustain without that. So as I was working through it and I was toning back the use of that aggression, I started finding myself almost lost for like probably 5-6 years. And I'm starting to pull myself out of it just now, but it was very difficult. Yeah, I mean that's a simple way to put it, right? But it kind of struck me that when you're dealing with something that dangerous, for lack of a better word, I think that's probably the right term, that's so core to you, and you're like trying to change it, you're beset on all sides by pain, right? And pain, struggle, you can kind of use those two interchangeably, but for me, especially with dealing with with the way I utilize rage and how integrated I had made it, an integrated, whatever that word is, I think it's integral, to my growth, that I had made that over the years. Um, Unwinding that and um, trying to figure out where I stood without it was exceedingly painful. I remember a couple of nights a few years back where I'd sit in my office and I'd have 7 or 8 YouTube videos of certain songs playing, and I'd just have them one after another after another after another, and I'd be sitting there with a full bottle of like Jack Daniels or whatever the drink of the night was, and I'd just sit there and drink and listen to music and drink and listen to music until there was essentially no walls left, right? And you kind of get to that state, and you don't have to use alcohol. You can, like, obviously I've figured out a little bit more over the years how to get into that state, but what I was essentially doing was self-medicating in a way to break down. I was self-medicating with a purpose, essentially. And that was to slowly strip away the walls and defenses that I had built up over the years, even with myself, to slowly peel back the layers and get to the underlying root of the problem. Because one of the things I noticed was I wasn't in a position on the topics of like anger and self-understanding of certain areas, right? Like relationships, things of that nature. I wasn't capable at the time of being truly honest with myself. And I'm sure still to this day I'm not, right? I'm significantly more capable, but like I know for a fact that there's limitations that I put on those conversations, right? So I used for a lot of years, like 5-10 years, I used alcohol and sad music or like specific movies to really trigger that emotional response that just kind of stripped away, right? So if you ever, I think the simplest way to explain this is if you've ever like watched a movie, and I think most people have these where you watch a movie or you listen to a song on repeat, and it cuts deep for you, right? And it actually like genuinely makes you sad. Over the years, I have a list essentially in my own head, right, of movies that'll do that, and like what sequences will allow it to hit harder, what songs, if I listen to them on repeat, will cut me open. Like one of the songs that does that is Come Wake Me Up by Rascal Flatts. That song is brutal. especially for me. Like I can listen to it, sit here, listen to it a couple times on repeat, and it's not a big deal. It's a good song. But if I sit there for an hour and a half listening to it on repeat, watching the video, and just like immersing myself in it, dude, that just cuts all the way down for me. Um, and a lot of that I think is because it's about, like, if you've never heard the song or if you've never seen the video, I highly recommend it. I'll drop a link to it in the comment or in the description. But it's essentially about a guy who loves a woman so much that he wants to make her the center of his world, and she's at odds with that because she wants to be able to retain her own person and to be her, and still have kind of a individualized and him, right? So individual and combined relationship piece, which is probably a healthy way to do it. I'm not going to make judgments on that either way. But eventually it comes up that as the song progresses, it's about her leaving him and him dealing with that and the internal turmoil that he goes through as he realizes that he's lost the woman he loves, because of the things and the way he was approaching that relationship. And like, to me, that song just cuts super deep, right? I'm sure most people probably have some variant of either a song or movie or like TV series or like some artistic expression that does that for them. If not, I'm very curious. Fair enough. But it, like, when I was listening to those songs, right, I found that it started cutting away my walls pretty effectively, and over time I would utilize that, and I realized that it wasn't getting me deep enough. And then I realized through some of the drinking I was doing in college and with some of my friends and stuff like that, that around the right people I could get to a point where that too would strip away like some of those barriers and walls. And I don't remember when I first did it, but there was a point where, actually I think I do now that I think about it. I think it would have been, see here, like 7 or 8 years ago. I was sitting in my apartment, actually. Yeah, and I was watching the anime Your Lie in April. And if you're down for, if you like classical music, like orchestral type music, and you're down for an emotional roller coaster, that anime is absolutely brutal. Every single person I know that I recommended watch it that's watched it, like, a lot of them come back and go, why the heck did you like recommend I watch that? It's just savagely brutal from an emotional standpoint. But I was sitting there and I had only planned on watching the first couple episodes because you got to give a show a shot, right? And I ended up watching every single episode of it. I think it's 24 episodes long, in succession, start to finish, while drinking. And I am not joking with this. From about episode 3 until probably episode 12. Yeah, I think it was episode 12. I pretty much cried straight through. And then episode 12, it was around there, somewhere in there. So for about 10 episodes, give or take, I was bawling my eyes out. And then like the show leveled off a little bit. And I got back my composure for a couple episodes, and then by about episode 13 until the very end, it was just an absolute sob fest. And for anybody that knows me, right, I'm not generally a super emotional guy. It takes me a lot to get to a point where, like, I'll actually, like, cry, like, genuinely cry. Um, well, there goes my dog. Okay. But that one just cut me deep, right? And then after that, in addition to the drinking, I started, like, I kind of, like, light bulb kind of came on, and I started going further and further down that rabbit hole, because I found that without being able to strip away those walls, I couldn't really get to the root of the issue, I guess, right? And kind of what I figured out from all of that, I figured out a bunch of things, obviously, but like one of the bigger things that I figured out was the direction I wanted to go with my life, I wasn't making progress on. right? So the main goal I've wanted for my life for a very long time is to have a family um, that I can help grow and nurture and support and protect, and some of the lessons I've learned and the things I've learned throughout my life I can pass on to my children and help enable them to grow into the best that they can be. Sort of how my parents did for me and my siblings. But I realized that like my extreme focus on work and essentially ignoring a lot of that rage was not conducive to that, right? Like it was great from a career progression perspective, but I essentially could not be a good quality partner to someone as long as I operated in that fashion. And as I've toned that back over the years, it's kind of thrown a lot of other things that I took as kind of core to who I am into question. Right. Like I always prided myself on my ability to just I'm doing this and get singularly focused and just drive and go and go and go and go. Um, but as I started to peel back that onion, I realized that a lot of that came from that rage, right? It came from that fire, and whether that was due to the like circumstances I was in, or that was, I was reanalyzing things in a way, deliberately in a way, to make them trigger that rage for me, which I know for a fact I did on multiple occasions, like numerous occasions. I'd purposely, in quite a few instances, I'd purposely reinterpret the way events transpired, and instead of looking at them going, I can, I can see why this would happen, it was I would tell myself essentially that it was done purely to spite me and purely because um, that person had ill will, right? Like essentially they were just malevolent. Which in retrospect, some of that was partially true, but a lot of that was self-inflicted, right? A lot of that was I was telling myself a narrative to drive a specific reaction internally so that I could continue to operate the way I knew how. Um, and all this kind of culminated at my last job when I worked at GoDaddy about, I want to say 2.5 years in. So this would have been, what, 3, 4 years ago now, maybe about 3 years ago. And all this culminated, and I was working an incident at work, and a security incident. It was a major issue, and I lost it. I absolutely blew up at like anybody and everybody in my senior leadership. Uh, like I called them on every little thing that bothered me. Um, like I'm pretty certain, if I recall correctly, I told my CISO at the time that um, the way that they ran their incident response program was completely like uh, backwards, brain dead, and if they actually wanted like real incident response, they had to support it, and I went off. In retrospect, it was not a good thing, right? It was actually a terrible thing. But in the moment, I didn't care. In the moment, it was, I am exceedingly pissed off. Like, you guys are taking extreme advantage of goodwill and your employees, and I torched everything. Um, and I was sitting there one night shortly after that. I was sitting in my house down in Maricopa, and just out of nowhere, I opened up one of my drawers in my living room. So I have end tables that had a drawer in it. I opened up one of them and I saw my handgun in there. And I immediately, and I mean immediately, like there was a momentary thought in my head of I could just say F all of this and eat a bullet. Right? And it wasn't I should do this. I need to make that clear. It was the recognition that in that moment that was something that is capable, that like I was capable of doing. Um, and I remember this like perfectly in my memory, crystal clear. Um, the moment I did, like the moment that hit me, and I'm talking like all of this happened in like a time span of probably 20 seconds. From the moment I opened the door to the moment I closed it again. I immediately got up, went into my office, and started looking up therapists. I ended up finding one, scheduling an appointment that night because they did online scheduling. Um, and in a week, I was sitting in a therapist's office, right? And I was never one for therapy. I always like, that's dumb. Just think through your problems yourself. You know yourself best. Deal with your issues, right? It's going to be slow. It's going to be painful, but you're strong enough. You're capable. You can do it. But in that moment, I kind of realized that's not true. Like, I pride myself on my ability to do that. And even I was sitting there going, okay, this, like, I'm to a point where, like, I need some help. So one of the things that I set, what was it? In my first session with my therapist, I set 2 rules. Was it 2? Might have been 3. I set a few rules. One was no medication. Plain and simple. Don't even recommend it. I don't care. I'm not looking for medication or like classification of like psychological illness type stuff, or like don't label me depressed. I don't care about any of that. It didn't matter to me, and it still doesn't, right? Like, I don't care if I have anxiety or like depression or any of that. I want to be, like, my goal was to be singularly focused on addressing the root problems behind them and not self-medicating to try to get to be able to address the root problems, right? It's not going to work for everybody. I don't recommend it for everybody. For some people it makes sense to be medicated, but I know myself well enough to know, and at the time even, I knew myself well enough to know that I could deal with that struggle and that hardship while still trying to learn the underlying or peel back the layers and figure out what the heck is going on underneath and make some corrections. And then one of the other rules I had was that she needed to challenge me on things because I put a lot of thought into ideas, and because I'm pretty self-aware is one way of wording it, but introspection I think is, or introspective is probably the better way to put it. It's easy to fall for your own trap, right? It's easy to buy into your own lie, and having that secondary person as you're talking through things to call you on your own BS, especially for me, is exceedingly helpful. I ended up working with her for 2.5 years, something like that, on a variety of different topics. And over time, like, it helped quite a bit, right? Because I didn't stop my own introspection outside of therapy. I didn't rely solely on therapy. I utilized it more as an opportunity to talk things through and to be challenged on ideas, right? And to get additional perspective. But one of the things I realized over time was that from where I was at that point when I started, that therapist was a good match for me. But over time, as I learned, as I progressed, as I gained additional understanding, I realized that I needed a different perspective. So I think it was, when would that have been? Was that earlier this year or late last year? I don't remember. I think it might have been earlier last year, maybe. Yeah, it would have been earlier last year. I ended my sessions with my previous therapist, and I spent the next like year and a half until now, going through and continuing that self journey. And I realized a couple weeks ago, give or take a couple weeks ago, so pretty recently, that I missed having that ability to have a conversation with, like, having that other person there that you could just have that direct conversation with, that has no, like, almost no investment in the outcomes of it, other than trying to help you be a better version of you. So if I kind of talk through all this, right, to close it out essentially by saying, if you're going through difficulties, if you're struggling, and you're kind of down with, like, you're kind of down a little bit about it, right? Maybe you're depressed, maybe you're destructive, maybe, like, whatever your situation is and whatever your topic is, find someone that you trust, whether that's a close friend, whether that's a brother, like somebody you hold dear. Maybe that's I wouldn't advise going to family. Family is a little bit too close to home. But find someone who you know can be objective, right? And genuinely come at that conversation from wanting nothing from you, but wanting the best for you. And that's a hard criteria to meet. But if you have someone in your circle that is that person for you, like if you have one, you're lucky, very lucky. If you have a few, you are exceedingly lucky. Hold on to them for dear life. But find them, have a conversation with them. In person is best. If at all possible, in person is absolutely best. Make it in a situation where you're comfortable. Make it neutral ground if you need to. It doesn't, like, whatever you need to do to be comfortable having that conversation. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. Whatever you need to do to make yourself less uncomfortable, right? Because those conversations are genuine, like generally speaking, not comfortable. So your goal should not be to be comfortable. Your goal should be to be comfortable enough to be willing to have the conversation. That should be your goal. And if you don't have any people like that, try to find a therapist. Try to find someone. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if, like, honestly, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who that person is. It matters who that person is to you and what their motivation is. And if you don't have someone that you feel that can do that, and you want to talk through a topic, send me a message on here. If you have my phone number or a way to get in touch with me outside of this, ping me. I might not know everything about you, but I am always, that's a true statement. I am always down, if I have the availability on my calendar, to have a long-form discussion with you, to just listen to and let you just talk through things. Because sometimes that's all you need, right? Sometimes you don't need someone to tell you a solution. Actually, when it's dealing with close personal issues, a lot of the time you don't need someone to tell you the solution. A lot of the time you need someone to listen as you talk through the problem, right? Because this is one of the reasons, actually this is the main reason I do this vlog, is because it allows me to talk through different scenarios and different topics and different ideas, and try to work out the underlying, like, what actually is under it. So if you don't have someone like that, and you're looking for someone, and you want to just have like a sounding board, or you want to have someone who will call you on things, and you don't have that, feel free to reach out. I'm down to have a discussion. I'm down to just listen. Because I might not know you super well. I might not know you at all. But I am, generally speaking, a pretty interested person, as long as people are being, to some varying degree, real, right? I get super interested as long as people are willing to, like, explore, right, to whatever depth that takes. So I think I'm going to kind of leave it there. If you're dealing with something, just know you're not alone. By no means are you alone. Basically, everybody out there is. They're just, a lot of them are just putting on a face. So don't feel like you're alone, but definitely, if you're going through things, try to find that one person or a couple of people that you are comfortable or that you're not entirely uncomfortable having a conversation with, to try to help talk things through. And if you are going through some things, I hope you take that opportunity. I hope you genuinely think and have those discussions with people, because I think over time, you probably won't see immediate benefit from it, but over time, it'll help you sort out your life. It'll help you sort out the issues you're facing. So with that, I hope you all have a great evening, and good night.